Okay. Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Risk-Based Monitoring Using Analytics and AI. So this webinar is another in CoreData's compliance webinar series. Each webinar is designed to provide you greater understanding of issues and challenges confronting compliance professionals. Our goal is to simplify what appears to be the complex world of compliance. Developing and implementing an effective and efficient compliance program that meets government expectations while providing your company a competitive advantage is challenging, especially when establishing the right corporate culture. Today, we continue the process to help you rethink your compliance approach. In today's webinar, we are emphasizing the intersection of technology and compliance by discussing how AI and analytics can assist compliance team conduct risk-based monitoring. Our objective is to provide you insights about how the latest technology advancements can be utilized for ensuring compliance when examining expense, when conducting risk-based monitoring. I am Jim Dawson, the VP of Compliance Solutions at CoreData, and I will be serving as your moderator today and providing some insights into today's presentations. I have over 30 years of pharmaceutical and biotech experience with approximately 15 years as a compliance officer. I am joined today, and I'm happy to say, with Azim Kamani, who is the chief operating, has over, I guess, a decade of software and industry experience and a strong background in audit and assurance. His career spans fintech, asset management, and life science compliance in the U.S., positioning him as a thought leader bridging technology and compliance regulation. Welcome, Azim, and we're glad you're here and look forward to hearing what you have to say today.
Thank you, Jim.
So let's get into what our objectives are for today, and we will really want to see make sure you learn about the critical role that analytics has in developing an effective risk mitigation plans and monitoring plan. Understand the evolution from random monitoring to risk-based monitoring, and discover how to establish a monitoring plan based on risk priorities, gain insights to using remediation strategies to ensure compliance and minimize risk. So really, we're just wanting to give you a good understanding of how to use the current technology to really drive a risk-based compliance program. So let's get started where we always start, which is at the beginning. And I think when we put together a monitoring plan, we have to start with risk. And so when we talk about risk assessment and monitoring, it really starts with the definition. All we're talking about when we say a risk assessment is basically a systematic approach or process to identify, evaluate, and prioritize risks that have a potential impact on the company's ability to do operations and conduct business. The way I like to look at that is, are you able to do research? Are you able to develop your products, manufacture them, market them, sell them, and then collect on the sales that you have? So it's really the overall business. And as you know, it's important to have a compliance and you manage these risks to make sure that you're adherence with all laws and regulations that affect our industry. But the biggest piece is to protect the company from potential legal, financial, and reputational risk. And, making sure that you've identified the clear vulnerabilities that could lead to major breaches, which is really saying, I got my risk controlled and they're well managed. So next slide. So if we start looking at really understanding a little bit more about the risk assessment process, I always like to think about the types of risks that we're dealing with. I break it down into operational risk, which, a lot of people think about it's the day-to-day piece. We like to, it's easy to pick it out when you look at supply chain issues or manufacturing concerns. But the same thing holds true in your day-to-day pieces when your sales force or your marketing groups are doing their pieces. You want to make sure that everything is operating appropriately. Financial risk, those monetary losses due to fines, penalties, or just inefficiencies in your own internal processes and way it works. Regulatory risk, non-compliance with regulations, laws, which can lead to fines or even the inability to market or sell your product. And then one that always comes up and everyone talks about is the reputational risk, which is damage to your brand or the overall company image. So that's a real easy way to say, all right, that's where we're going to start. We're going to sit here and we prioritize and look at risk. But this is also the foundation for where you build out a compliance program. I think we have a couple simple polling questions we'd like to do before we get into some of the others. You want to pull those up, Shane? Yeah. So the first questions is, are you leveraging AI and analytics for a risk management process? Simple yes or no. And then if you are leveraging AI, for what purposes? For risk assessment, monitoring programs, analytics. There may be others, but these are just some simple ones for you to take a look at. And as these are coming up and you're giving your responses, I'm going to turn over to Azim, who will sort of take us into the next step once we're done with the polling. And Azim, if you can sort of share the results of the poll that came in, that'd be great. There we go. So I think we have all the responses in. If you want to take over, Azim.
Yes, sure. Most of the responses I see, like people are using AI for the analytics piece and for the risk assessment. I think that's a great input that we have got. And I think with the AI becoming now more common in every industry, so the compliance in any industry should also be focusing on these stuff. So let's talk some basics about the risk assessment process and then figure out how AI can help us navigate these problems with the risk assessment itself. So let's start with first of the basic fundamental of the risk assessment process, and that is the risk identification techniques. So whenever we perform the risk assessment in any of the industry or in any of the company, we start with identifying the risk first. And there are multiple dimensions by which a risk can be identified. So for example, the first and foremost critical element, in my opinion, is the event inventories. So, in every industry you operate, there are some risks which are common to that industry. So, for example, if we are operating in a life sciences compliance industries, there might be a continuous risk of improper payment to physician. Likewise, we can have a risk for off-label promotion, and we can also have a risk for marketing material promotions review. So these type of risks are very common for the life science industry where we operate. So how AI can help you? Like AI can analyze large volume of data set, It can keep a close eye on all the regulatory changes. Either it should be coming from the FDA, or it should be coming from your DOJ guidelines, or it's incorporated in your pharma code. So all these checks should be added into our AI ML models to look for any changes in the regulatory environment or regulatory landscape. And in that manner, we can maintain our event inventories up to date and current, so that the compliance folk or a board member or a board committee can go there and then start their prioritization and define the mitigation strategies. So that's the first and foremost pillar of your risk identification techniques. And if we go on to the next level, then the second most important thing is the questionnaire, or it could be a surveys, or it could be any different workshop that you perform. So in essence, you meet with your stakeholders. Your stakeholders could be internal or it could be external. Like you can interview your team manager, you can interview your individual employee, or you can interview your leadership team. So in this manner, you get a plenty of various responses from them. And once you get all the responses from them, you can use the AI technology or maybe an NLP, which is called a natural language processing model, to process that data and capture the actionable insight out of it. So for example, if you have a survey conducted around your improper payment to physician, so in that way, your AI can analyze what you have talked about it, what you have written about it. It can perform the sentiment analysis on it and then provide you an actionable insight like this risk is an emerging risk for you and you should be focusing on it. So we do have a event inventories at first, and then we do have a questionnaire, surveys, and facilitated workshops in there as an identification technique. So Shane, can you move to the next one? All right. Then, in my opinion, the third one is the evaluation of your internal audit reports. So, AI here can help you dive into multiple audit reports that you have run over past couple of years, or maybe 5 to 10 years, and it can identify trends in it. It can also identify some patterns in it, and it can provide you information like this risk is a recurring risk and you should be focusing on this risk for this period of time, or you should be ignoring this risk for a little bit in your time frame. So internal audit reports and its evaluation is also a critical function when we perform the risk identification for your life science compliance industry. Then going next, we have a process flow analysis technique. So in this case, I know when we go and perform each processes and we analyze those processes, it could be a burdensome for us, or it could lead to any human errors or manual errors while evaluating those processes. So here, AI can evaluate all your processes, which could be around your HCP contracting, which could be around your payment approvals, or it could be around how you review your promotional material. And it can identify the deviation or gaps in your process that can lead to a compliance issue. So process flow analysis is also a key component for your risk identification technique. And with the help of AI, it can be done later, no, not later, so that you can have a proactive approach to all the risks that has been identified through different techniques. And then, beside all these techniques, there are also other identification criteria like you can have a leading event indicator and escalation triggers. Like if something happens and that triggers can lead to a compliance issue or not. So, for example, if you have a policy like a sales rep and HCP cannot meet more than 3 times in a month, so if that case happens, an AI model can alarm you, like the frequent interaction has been made between the HCP and a sales rep. It has been done on several occasions. It has been done on specific times. It has done on specific days. So it can be something fishy, like why the sales rep is meeting the same HCP over and over again and at a particular day of a week. So it can also provide you with that information, like there is a leading event which can lead to a compliance issue in future. And then there could be other method as well, like a brainstorming method is one of the method where you engage with different stakeholders and get their feedback and then analyze like if there is any risk identified or not. Likewise, you can also have a risk identification from your hotline reporting. Anything reported, so the hotline should be or should also be reviewed and should be taken into account for your risk identification process. So that's the whole framework of the risk identification, which is a part of your major chunk of risk assessment process. All right, Shane, I guess we can move to the next slide. Okay. So in here, we have a risk prioritization technique. Like once you have identified the risk, and now you have to decide what is the priority of that risk. Either it's a high level of risk, either it's a medium level of risk, or either it's a low level of risk. So you assign a risk score to each of your risk areas. And there are two critical components for a risk prioritization technique. First, the likelihood of the risk. So the likelihood really means like what is the probability of that risk for being happen. And then the impact is what should be or what could be a potential consequence of that identified risk. So one is the probability, second is the consequence, and then you have your risk matrix created. Based on the likelihood and impact, you get a risk score, and then you get a different risk score for each of your risk area. So that process helps you identify your risk priority among the whole list of your risk areas. So here, I guess AI can help you figure out the likelihood of that risk area. Like it can analyze your past incidents, it can identify patterns, and it can also assess conditions that can result in your risk prioritization being changed, right? Similarly, we can have a model that could predict the consequence of that risk based on the historical trends. And to have impact level, there could be multiple factors that a model could check. Like it could check what would be the financial loss if that risk happened, what would be the regularity penalties, whether it should be counted as a reputational damage. So all those impact can be automatically calculated by our AI technology. So I guess all the main components like the risk identification piece and the risk prioritization piece, both can be easily solved if we integrate AI solution in our risk management process. All right, Shane, I'm ready to move on the next slide. Okay, so the third step of the risk assessment process is to define your mitigation strategy. So once you have identified your risk area, you have prioritized your risk area, then now you define the mitigation strategy you would like to take. So for example, in some of the condition, for some of the risk areas, you will propose a strategy or you will decide the strategy for risk avoidance. Like you have to eliminate that risk from the scratch. So you will take those action to eliminate those risks. Secondly, there could be some occasion where you decide you have to reduce the risk to an acceptable tolerance level. So that is called risk reduction methods. In that you place some controls for the risk area and then you monitor it continuously throughout the time you operate in that industry, right? And then going forward, it could be a risk sharing technique in that you transfer your risk to the third party through some insurance or through some partnership. So we have risk avoidance as a first technique, then we have a risk reduction technique, we do have a risk sharing philosophy, and then the fourth one is the risk acceptance level. So for all the risk which you can say is acceptable for the company, you can have those in a acceptance criteria or the mitigation strategy. And now, if we talk about how AI can help us in the mitigation strategy, I would say like the risk level can be changed over time. So the AI can quickly and proactively watch your monitoring activities and will alarm you in the condition whenever it felt like your risk level are changing and you need to redefine your mitigation strategy, right? So all these stuff can easily be handled by the AI and ML technologies. Now, going forward, to mitigate all those risks, there should be some tools and there should be some resources in the mitigation strategy. So maybe a company could decide like they should be going to the compliance management software that could automatically track all the risks that they have identified and provide you a real-time analytics on how your controls are functioning. So you can have all those ability in the compliance management software. Secondly, you can have a training and education section. Like you have to ensure like all of your compliance professional are up to date with all your policies, and then they are equally equipped and trained for all those policies which you have mentioned. Third, you can prepare for a scenario planning. Like if that risk happens, what should we do? What should be our response to that risk happening? So it can all come into a risk scenario planning mechanism. And then finally, you can have a data analytics tool that performs the advanced analytics and provide you a real-time insights on the emerging issues and risk and provide you actionable insight so that you can take a proactive action as soon as you can. All right, over to
Well,
you.
thanks, Azim, for a great run through there on risk assessment and monitoring approaches as well. But let's sort of take this a little differently and move now from talking about everything that you covered, Azim. Now let's talk about looking at the monitoring approaches and sitting down and saying, we've got risk identified. We need to look at how we're going to monitor to make sure those are well managed and under control. And I would sit back and say, look at traditionally how we've approached monitoring. And I would say it's been somewhat what I'd call random monitoring, which says we'll just conduct audits where we're going to monitor various activities based off of what we know historically have been risk areas for the industry or even within our company. And so the challenge becomes it may be inefficient in how we allocate our resources. Are we going to put all our resources into monitoring Salesforce lunch and learns, or are we going to just do speaker programs? And so you may put all your resources in doing looking at speaker programs when they may not be the highest risk you have. There may be other areas that become more important to you that could be your consulting agreements that you need to have a better look at or manage on. So it's where you put your efficiencies or where you put your resources to be more efficient. And then by doing some of it, you may just be doing a random selection of some of this, and we may not be seeing the major or critical factors. We could be overlooking some risk that we really should be focusing on it and addressing. And then a lot of times as we develop our monitoring programs, we're sort of reactive. We're looking at it from, hey, this is what's happened in the past. We've seen this. So we always need to address it now. We have a sales rep that we've found in Resume Speed, Arkansas, that is promoting off-label, or they've had some major problems with their in-office presentations and meals. Well, we then extrapolate that. Well, that may be a problem throughout the country. So we need to now go and monitor everybody to make sure that's not being the case. So we don't want to be overreactive. We want to be appropriate to the areas we need to and address the risks that really at hand. And try and get out in front of them ahead of time. And so as the industry is changing, as the OIG and DOJ have really said to us, is we need to know our data better. We need to know our risk. We need to manage our uh, programs a lot better to make sure we are focusing on the right things and we are not letting things slip. So the complexity of the industry and our environment is requiring us to be more targeted and more efficient in what we monitor and how we monitor it to make sure we're controlling our risk. And then we're dealing with limited resources and then necessitate us to be more strategic about how we go about our risk monitoring or risk mitigation activities and our true monitoring programs. So those are always very important to considerations as we look at moving forward from a more traditional approach to a more, what I'd say, evolving into a more AI or more advanced monitoring program and using, as I say, analytics and AI. Azim has talked about that from a risk standpoint, some other things. But when we look at, you can move the slide ahead, Shane, please. There you go. But when we look at leveraging AI and analytics for risk-based monitoring in a more advanced role, we can look at it from I guess, a few areas, which is looking at pattern recognition. So we can look at all the data that's out there and do we see some things happening out there where we need to monitor a little bit more closely or use predictive analytics or even automation. And Azim, I'm going to come back to you on this because this is really your area and things that you can deal with. Is there, how would you look at AI from a risk-based monitoring, especially in these areas?
All right. So for the pattern analysis, I guess identifying the patterns around all activities are very crucial. So what I have seen so far in the compliance industry is everyone is looking in silos. Like someone is looking at the speaker program, and then another department is responsible for the TNE, and then someone is responsible for the ride along, someone is responsible for the hotline reporting. So that's not how you get the real insights on your emerging risk. So we need to consolidate all those data variations that we get from different resources. And once we have the accumulation of data, then we can only perform the analytics on those one. Like for example, if you compare your speaker spend source data with the prescription data, that could provide you a best predictive analytics. Like whenever your spending is increasing for a particular speaker, their prescription habit is also increasing. So that's kind of pattern recognition is very important. Similarly, the last case which I just mentioned, like if there is a frequent interaction between the HCP and the sales rep, and it is happening at a particular restaurant every time and for the same day. So that's kind of pattern that they are meeting. So that there could be something fishy in there when we look at it. Similarly, if we have an automated tool by which you provide a risk severity or risk score to your speakers, and then we do have another scoring system where you provide the risk scoring to the sales rep itself. And then when you see if your high speaker and your high risk sales rep is having a same event together. So AI can predict easily like there should be something wrong when those two meets. Like in one area, in one axis, you have a speaker which is at high risk, which is continuously providing off-label promotion, and you are providing him the casino ticket, you are booking the resort for him, and then you have a sales rep who is continuously breaching your meal limit, who is continuously meeting the same HCPs over and over again. So the combination of two can be a worst scenario for a compliance to see. So these kind of scenarios can only be tracked when you implement some of the AI technologies, ML technologies. You consolidate all your data set into one platform, and then you analyze the pattern overall. So, in short, I will say eh, do not look at anything in silos. Just do your analysis through AI at the 360 level. Like look at all the different scenarios, try to club the data, try to analyze the pattern, try to find out any escalating triggers that can lead to the non-compliance. So that's my 2 cents here.
No, that's great insights, Azim. Thank you. And so if we move to the next slide, it sort of leads me to say, okay, how do the AI and analytics really enhance your monitoring program? And I think when we sit down initially is using data to drive decisions. And I think, and when I look at it, if you have good data provides and good analytics, you can sit down and get better insights into where you need to monitor. But more importantly, you can start seeing where you have what I call control failures. Your monitoring programs in place, is it working? Or you can see that the controls you put in place in your policies or procedures, you can now start identifying and make quick decisions on where those controls are working or not working. At the same time, with what's happening with the technology and AI, you can get to real-time monitoring where you can start implementing alerts and dashboards to really help you improve your compliance and minimizing risk. And it allows for what I would say is more immediate actions. And we can be more preventive in our actions as opposed to being reactive. And then with the enhanced analytics, you now get to move to more continuous improvement in your programs and making sure as your monitoring or your mitigation activities come in play, they get stronger and they get more effective in what they're doing. And that's all because you have better monitoring strategies with better data and better analytics. As you improve it over time, it gets more efficient. So as we move into the next slide, so we talk about the benefits, and we just sort of hit on a few of those, but it really is looking at better efficiency. We can focus, be more efficient with our resources and our time and our efforts to really focus on those high risk and those high areas that are where controls aren't working as well as we would like to, so we can utilize resources more effectively and avoid waste. And then by our being more targeted with our monitoring and with the data analytics we have in place, we can be more effective in catching control failures or where risks are, and then address those early on. So our compliance programs or our risk mitigation programs are truly effective when we can actually demonstrate that. And then, as we talked on several times, is we can become more and more proactive. And so we go and get out in front of these issues because we have identified some trends or we see some things in the data that predicts that a certain behavior is going to be, so we can start monitoring for those. So we can be basically out in front of it to prevent any violations or any concerns that we would have relative to the activities that our employees are doing, or especially our sales and marketing people. So, and so a lot of this gets into reviewing our risk priorities, and that sort of gets into that continuous risk assessment, which is all those. So with the data coming in, we can see where the risks are, where controls are either working or not working, and that's all because of good, effective monitoring. We can also keep on top of what the updated risk profiles are in the organization, as well as what the environment's saying, what the regulatory changes are and shifts. So, we can use AI to help with that data, integrate the data from external sources, as well as looking at it from real-time updates with AI, leveraging all the data analytic techniques that Azim was talking about earlier. Azim, do you have anything you would like to add relative to this as well?
Yeah, what I do not understand is I have seen many compliance professional waiting for the month to end, waiting for a quarter to end, and then perform their analytics and take the actions from there on. So in the modern world, I believe we shouldn't be waiting for that long, or we shouldn't be waiting for the risk to occur. Instead, we should be proactive enough. So whenever a new transaction take place, whenever this has been incurred, it should be flowed down in any of your data analytics tool, and it should also be incorporated into your risk assessment. So the early we get the information, or the early we get the alert, like something is gonna is wrong, is gonna happen, we should be taking the proactive action right there and then. We shouldn't be waiting for too long, like a month or quarter, or a 6 monthly cycle to review the risk assessment plan. So it should be a continuous process. And for this, like the continuing process to be held, so I do not think any human can perform it. So it's the only AI solution, it's the only ML technologies, NLP services, generative AI phenomena that we should be using to continuously assess our risk assessment, and then should be getting a real-time insights of your risk. So that's all I have to say on this one.
No, that's great, Zim. Thank you for that additional information and insight. Next slide, please. So, yeah, we've hit on this on allocating resources and how you deal with it. I don't want to belabor this much more, but we really do have to look at resource optimization, tools and technology to help us with that. Whether it be automated monitoring, AI-powered management. This is really what Azim has talked about quite a bit today. But is there anything you want to add in this area, Azim?
Okay, so for the resource optimization, I would say why to focus on your low risk item, like uh, the major case which I am seeing right now. If we talk about expense auditing, why looking at all the reports that doesn't have any issues, why not to incorporate some AI technologies that can audit your reports, and then let's figure out what's the trouble report, and then the compliance should only be looking at the actual issues, and not the issues that are fake or that didn't happen. So we should be using AI in a way like every focus area, every improvement area, every non-compliant should be there for compliance to review. So they won't be no longer needed to go in each and every area and spend their time. I know our compliance team is very limited. They have a resource constraint. So why not putting all the efforts in the high risk areas, right?
Great. All right, next slide, please. So now we've gone through the monitoring plan. We now have good techniques in place for analyzing the data, monitoring the data. We've identified potential problems or areas that need to be resolved where we have to take some remediations. And I think that's all part of a good risk mitigation and monitoring program is once we've identified a problem, we take the appropriate corrective actions. And it's critical as we go through that. Excuse me, and look at the development of the monitoring plan, that we should have a really structured framework so we can get to those pieces to make sure we've identified those key areas uh, and make sure we're getting those things done on time. And again, where AI and predictive monitoring come into place, so we can find those places for remediation and taking the appropriate corrective actions. And then the continuous improvement process. So, Azim, anything that you see further here, or shall we just
Yeah, I think you have covered it in this slide.
okay,
Got it.
okay. Can we move to the next slide, please? So yeah, and I was hitting on this just a second ago with remediations, and as I said, it's critical that we really understand where the gaps are, and that when I say in compliance adherence, it's my control failures is what I like to say again, and that we've identified and we've taken the appropriate action so they don't come back and have the problem again. As I get, with a good risk mitigation strategy, you can sit down and reduce the likelihood of any reoccurrence by looking at the underlying issues as well as understanding and meeting all the regulatory or government requirements. You're demonstrating that you're taking a proactive approach. And then, as I say, the key components to any good, effective remediation is really getting to root cause. And I think using good data analytics and using the appropriate tools, we can really have a better chance of getting to what the root cause was or what the underlying problem was. And I think we spend too much time dealing with the symptoms and not really understanding what is causing all those symptoms to occur. And then, as we all know, over and over again, we have to take the appropriate corrective actions and make sure that we are doing uh, the appropriate uh, preventive measures so they don't come up again. Um, so I think that's the real piece of that, and how we use data and our systems to drive that within the and looking at the role of AI and analytics in doing that is very important. Um, and so really, Zim, I'd like to really throw this more over to you if I can, because we know that there's automation and there's ways for remediations, and using AI can help that, especially looking at predictive pieces of that. And then any of the things that you see relative to driving, uh, using AI to drive the remediation.
So, in my opinion, I think AI can be used proactively to suggest the remediation measure. So, in most of the cases, like we have seen, like if we talk about remediation, there are only two things comes into our mind. One is the coaching and training for the appropriate personnel, and another is the policy updates. So, if you are looking at the data set in silos and not checking the data set overall, you cannot identify like if that's a one-off violation or that's a recurring violation that is happening in your company. And if you find out it's a one-off violation, then it could be an issue related to your training and coaching plan, right? But if you see there's a frequent violation of any of your policy and it's done by multiple person at a different stage, then it could be somehow defect in your policy itself. So in here, you will have to update your policy instead of coaching your personnel. So that's how AI can differentiate the different actions that a compliance could take. Like they can recommend a training plan based on the violations or based on the non-compliance, or they can suggest an improvement to a leadership team regarding the certain policy. So that's how we differentiate between suggestions that is provided by the AI solution. And when we talk about the predictive remediation, so for suppose maybe if I find like I'm observing my live monitoring for the speaker program, and I see most of the most of the sales rep are using an inappropriate venue for the speaker program to happen. So predictive remediation can be created on spot by the AI technology, and it can create a policy like these venues are not appropriate for the speaker program, and it should not be booked by any of your speaker bureau or your sales rep. So it can recommend these type of policy, and it can also justify like if you do your speaker program at this venue or you order your food from this vendor, then we have seen similar kind of non-compliance in your interaction. Like whenever your venue is inappropriate, you do not have a minimum attendee, and you do have an alcohol served in your event, and the people are not present for the entire session of the speaker program. So that's kind of connecting the dots can only be done through the AI technology. So it can provide you a recommended action. It can provide you the root causes, like what could be the implication, and then it can provide you a suggestion like what to do next. So all these kind of remediation can be easily handled by artificial intelligence nowadays. That's
Yeah,
my opinion on this one.
no, that's great, Azim. So, as we move to closing up here, just from your, and I'm just asking you off the cuff here, uh, when you look at AI and relative to risk-based monitoring, how would you summarize where we are today? I mean, can the audience go out and tomorrow and just start doing AI risk mitigation plans? Uh, is there enough out there? Is there enough approaches to make that doable? Or are we just at the beginning of it?
I think the industry as of now is at the beginner stage, and there are a lot to come with respect to AI. So nothing is perfect as of now, but I think one should start looking into it until we get lead. So there should be someone who can get a precedent or a stage for other to follow. We shouldn't be standing in a line waiting for other to do it and then copy them. We should be the first and foremost to make it happen. So let's get started thinking about the different use cases of AI, or how you can effectively use AI in your processes to reduce your time, to reduce your cost, and to focus on high compliance areas and ignore the lower areas, or maybe just park it on some side and then commit later until it get to your emerging risk list. So, in my opinion, we are still at the beginning stage of the AI in when we talk about risk assessment and mitigation plan.
Yeah.
But it could solve our all problem, right?
No, I think that's great insight and where we are right now, Azim. And I
Mhm.
think the other thing that I'm hearing you say, and maybe I'm misinterpreting you, but it it seems like the use of AI should be used for a purpose, not necessarily because it's the latest fashion and it's the latest buzzword we're dealing
Yeah,
with or the latest thing to work with. But if you're going to use AI, make sure you're using it for the right purpose with it and understanding the strengths and limitations of that various type of AI, whether it be um, machine learning or the natural language programming or whatever it may be, that you have a set purpose for it. You're not just using AI for AI. Am
yeah.
I correct on that?
Yes, I think everything is doable right now, but the use case should be perfect and it should be real. Like we shouldn't be doing it
Sure.
if everyone is doing it. We shouldn't be using it as a buzzword only in our speeches, or to show someone like we are doing things in the AI. But still, I would recommend we should be starting looking into it, and we should be focusing our actions, like what job we are performing right now and where we are facing most of the challenges, and then reaching out to some of the expert to find out if that's solvable through AI or not.
That's great. Thank you. Uh, So I think we're at the point of wrapping up here in the next couple of minutes, but I think there's a few key takeaways that we should be looking at. One is the importance of basically having a comprehensive risk mitigation or risk assessment and effective mitigation strategies. I think we all are trying to do that. I think we all have that in place in some way, shape, or form, but we just need to make sure that they're there and they're working well. I think we have to look at where we're going with risk-based monitoring and make sure that that's the way you're looking at it. Don't just do monitoring because we've always monitored speaker programs or we've always monitored the sales force. In-office meals. I think we have to look at where your risks are. Let's make sure that you have the right monitoring and plan in place using the right tools and using the right analytics. And then I think the key part of that is also the prioritization. And again, the risk assessment and mitigations. I think we talked about and we covered it, the fact that it's a continuous risk assessment tailored to the and tailored with mitigation strategies for essential proactive compliance management. And again, this is basically just saying, hey, look, let's make sure that we have identified the risk. We have good monitoring programs in place that we can make sure that we're constantly improving and assessing our mitigation strategies and make sure they're working well. And then we need to use the appropriate tools to prioritize a risk and make sure that we're doing all of our activities on those that are going to have the biggest impact and the most likelihood to occur and affect the organization. Uh, next, next slide, please. And then let's look at the transition to, I guess, as I said earlier, to a risk-based monitoring, shift from the random. Let's make sure we're highly focused on the key risk areas. And then again, leveraging AI and analytics for real-time insights, predictive monitoring, and enhancing the effectiveness and efficiency of our risk mitigation programs. Next slide. Next slide, please. There you go. And then the key is let's make sure that we develop a monitoring plan with with a structure that is based on risks that are prioritized, understanding what is necessary to be mitigated or watched within that risk, all those activities that you need to monitor, and how do you use the appropriate AI to automate routine tasks and focus on the critical areas. And then regularly review and adjust your plan based on what the information or the data you get coming from your monitoring plan to make sure you're identifying potential emerging risk. Next slide, please. And, effectively make sure you're remediating all the identified control failures to make sure that you really know what the compliance issues are and you put in the appropriate preventive actions so you don't get reoccurrence. And I think we've heard over and over again today is make sure you utilize AI appropriately to help drive your remediations to identify the failure or the breach that occurred. So you can now have used potentially predictive analytics to drive the corrective actions and the continuous improvement. And I think when we sit down and talk about all these things, next slide, please. It really says, let's get out in front of this. Let's make sure that we understand where we're going with our risk mitigation programs and monitoring programs. And make sure we stay in front of it and always challenge ourselves to improve it. With that, I want to say thank you to everybody. I want to say a special thank you to Azim for his excellent insights and information he shared with us, and we'll open up for questions. Are there any questions that we may address?
Please feel free to share your question on the Q&A section, or you can even share it on the chat.
Azim, I will ask one because I think as we wait for some of these to come in,
Sure.
From your experience, and again, I think I hit on this a little bit earlier, where should someone start when you're looking at a monitoring program and using, at least start looking at analytics or AI in enhancing the analytics program? Where would you recommend someone start?
I think the first step is the risk-based monitoring where we should be starting. I have seen people performing the random sampling for their monitoring activities. So if they do have a risk-based system that scores each of their physicians, or if it can score each of their monitoring activities, like there should be a first step to start with. Like for each of the physician, if you see the physician is high risky, and then you see there is some program in which he is included as a speaker, like the next program, and you have not done the monitoring for that particular physician for about last six number of months. So all those factors can be included, and then it could provide a risk score to certain speaker or physician, and then you decide to monitor that physician for the next event. So
Okay.
starting with the risk scoring, but the risk-based scoring should also having should also have some basic fundamentals of AI use cases by which it can predict the non-compliance, or it can predict like it any non-compliance issue can be emerged for the following interaction. So all those
Great.
can be mixed together for you to decide like which physician to monitor next, or which rep to monitor next, which contracting program you should go for. So all those attributes combined can give you a clear picture.
I appreciate that, Azim. Thank you for that insight. We have come to the end of our time today. Again, I thank you, Azim, for your participation and great insights. Thank you to all you who have attended, and we hope that you found today's webinar informative and gave you some insights, and it at least challenged you to start thinking a little bit differently in how you handle your monitoring programs. So with that, we say thank you. We look forward to your participation in our next webinar. And please understand that all these the slides will be available, and you can reach us at on our website. So thank you very much, and have a great day.
All right, thank you everyone. Bye bye.